On this blessed February 3rd, a Tuesday stitched quietly into the fabric of our lives, we gather not by accident but by grace. We come carrying the weight of our worries and the light of our hopes, standing at the doorway of prayer with hearts open and voices ready. Today we pause, not because the world has slowed, but because our souls need reminding. We lift our eyes in gratitude to a God whose mercy meets us every morning, who loves us not because we are perfect, but because love is who He is. Through valleys we survived and storms we did not see coming. His mercy held us steady, and His unfailing love whispered, "You are not alone." So today we pray not out of habit, but out of holy thankfulness. We thank God for mercy that forgives, love that endures, and grace that carries us from what was into what can still be. Let this prayer be our praise, our healing, and our testimony. Gratitude is not a soft feeling we brush against on good days and forget when the sky darkens. It is a sacred act, a deliberate choosing, a bending of the soul toward the light, even when shadows stretch long across the floor of our lives. Gratitude is not born of ease alone. It is forged in memory, in survival, in the quiet realization that we are still here. To give thanks is to testify. It is to stand up in the middle of ordinary time and say, "I have seen trouble and I have also seen mercy, and mercy has had the final word." When we speak of gratitude as sacred, we speak of reverence. We speak of attention. We speak of the holy pause that interrupts the rush of our days and reminds us that breath itself is borrowed grace. Gratitude asks us to look again at what we thought was small and discover that it has been carrying us all along. The cup of water, the steady ground beneath our feet, the strength to rise when rising felt impossible, these are not accidents. They are gifts quietly delivered, faithfully renewed. Gratitude does not deny pain, it dignifies it. It does not tell sorrow to be silent, it gives sorrow a companion. When we give thanks in the midst of brokenness, we are not pretending the cracks do not exist. We are declaring that the cracks are not the end of the story. Gratitude becomes the language of survivors, the hymn of those who have walked through fire and found their names still intact. It is the voice that says, "I am wounded, but I am not finished." There is a discipline to gratitude, and like all disciplines, it requires practice. It asks us to train our eyes to see beyond what is missing and notice what remains. This is not a trick of optimism, it is a work of faith. Faith says that what we can count today is enough to begin. Faith says that even when the road curves out of sight, the one who guides our steps has not lost the map. Gratitude, then, is faith made visible. It is belief with its sleeves rolled up. In the sacred act of gratitude, memory becomes an altar. We lay upon it the stories of how we were carried through nights that felt too long, how doors opened just when hope was running thin, how strength showed up wearing the plain clothes of perseverance. We remember the times mercy arrived unannounced through a friend's phone call, a stranger's kindness, a calm that made no logical sense. Gratitude honors memory not to keep us bound to the past, but to remind us of the faithfulness that will meet us in the future. Gratitude also has a way of straightening our posture. It lifts our chins from the narrow gaze of complaint and teaches us to look outward and upward. When we give thanks, we are released from the exhausting work of entitlement. We stop demanding that life prove itself worthy of us, and we begin to receive life as it is offered, imperfect, astonishing, fragile, and still sacred. Gratitude humbles us without shrinking us. It places us rightly in the universe, cherished, dependent, and deeply connected. There is courage in gratitude. It takes courage to thank God when answers have not yet arrived, when prayers feel suspended in midair. But gratitude in those moments becomes an act of trust. It says, "I do not yet see the full picture, but I trust the artist." This kind of gratitude is not loud. It does not shout. It whispers. It steadies. It stays. It is the quiet confidence that love is working, even when the evidence is still gathering. Gratitude reshapes our relationships. When we practice thanksgiving, we begin to see people not as obstacles or disappointments, but as fellow travelers, each carrying their own invisible load. Gratitude softens our judgments and widens our compassion. It teaches us to say thank you not only for what people do for us, but for who they are, complex, unfinished, trying. In this way, gratitude becomes a bridge connecting hearts that might otherwise remain divided by pride or pain. In prayer, gratitude is the doorway through which we enter the presence of God. Before we ask, we acknowledge. Before we speak our needs, we recognize the grace that has already met us. Gratitude aligns our spirits with truth, that God has been faithful before we knew how to name faithfulness, loving before we learned how to love back. Thanksgiving in prayer is not flattery. It is recognition. It is the soul remembering its source. Gratitude also teaches us patience. When we give thanks for what is present, we learn to wait without despair for what is promised. We understand that time is not empty, it is active, shaping us, strengthening us, preparing us. Gratitude keeps us from rushing past the lessons of the moment. It invites us to stay, to listen, to learn what this season has come to teach. In this way, gratitude becomes a tutor, gentle but firm, insisting that we grow. There is a communal power in gratitude. When one voice gives thanks, it gives permission for others to do the same. Gratitude multiplies when it is shared. It becomes a chorus, reminding a weary world that goodness has not gone extinct. In communities where gratitude is practiced, hope finds fertile ground. People begin to believe again, not because life is perfect, but because love is persistent. Gratitude does not require grand gestures. It thrives in the ordinary. It lives in the habit of noticing the way morning light finds the window, the sound of laughter breaking through a hard day, the simple miracle of making it through another night. Gratitude sanctifies the ordinary by naming it holy. It tells us that we do not have to wait for extraordinary circumstances to praise. The present moment is enough. When we call gratitude a sacred act, we are acknowledging its power to transform us. Thanksgiving changes the giver as much as it honors the giver. It reorders our priorities, recalibrates our hearts, and reminds us of what truly matters. Gratitude does not erase struggle, but it gives struggle meaning. It anchors us in the truth that mercy has been sufficient, love has been unfailing, and grace has been nearer than we knew. And so we choose gratitude not because it is easy, but because it is true. We choose it as an offering, as a discipline, as a way of life. We choose it on ordinary Tuesdays and extraordinary days alike. We choose it with trembling hands and steady hearts. For in giving thanks we do more than remember blessings. We become witnesses to mercy, living proof that love endures. God's mercy does not arrive once, make a grand appearance, and then quietly exit the stage. It is not a visitor who comes only when summoned by perfect behavior or polished prayers. Mercy is constant. It moves with us. It breathes where we breathe and waits where we stumble. God's mercy is ongoing, meaning it did not end with yesterday's forgiveness, nor will it be exhausted by tomorrow's mistakes. It is a river that does not dry up, no matter how many times we return thirsty. There are those who believe mercy must be earned, that it is a reward handed out sparingly to the well-behaved and the well-spoken. But mercy, in its truest form, refuses such limitations. Mercy shows up in the middle of failure, not after we have cleaned ourselves up. It meets us while our knees are still on the ground, while shame is still whispering lies into our ears. Mercy says, "You may rise now," and it says it again and again. Ongoing mercy is God's way of reminding us that our worst moments do not define us. We are not summed up by the chapters we wish we could tear out of our stories. Mercy turns the page without erasing the lesson. It allows us to remember without being imprisoned by memory. This mercy understands human frailty. It knows we are dust and breath, courage and fear, hope and hesitation, and still it chooses us. Mercy meets us each morning before we have spoken a word. It arrives ahead of our apologies and our promises to do better. It is present in the simple fact that we wake up with another chance to try again, another chance to love more gently, another chance to walk a little closer to the good we know we are capable of. Morning mercy does not interrogate us about yesterday. It simply hands us today. There is a tenderness to ongoing mercy that reshapes how we see God. This is not a distant judge tallying our failures, but a faithful presence bending low to lift us when we fall. Mercy does not shout our shortcomings across the room. It leans in close and speaks softly, reminding us of who we are becoming, not only who we have been. In mercy, God speaks the language of patience. Ongoing mercy also teaches us humility. When we realize how often we are forgiven, how consistently grace makes room for us, pride loosens its grip. We understand that we stand not by our own strength alone, but by mercy that has steadied us more times than we can count. This realization does not weaken us. It humanizes us. It allows us to extend to others what we ourselves have so freely received. Mercy is present in survival. It is there in the fact that we endured seasons that should have undone us. Some of us walked through grief that hollowed out our days. Some of us carried burdens heavier than our years. Some of us made choices we would never repeat. And yet here we are, not untouched but standing, scarred perhaps but breathing. That too is mercy, ongoing, persistent, and quietly powerful. There is mercy in the pauses of life, in delays that frustrate us but protect us, in closed doors that spare us from paths we were not ready to walk. At the time we may call these moments disappointments. Later, with clearer eyes, we recognize them as mercy disguised. Ongoing mercy does not always feel gentle in the moment, but it is always purposeful. God's mercy is ongoing even when our faith wavers, even when belief feels thin and prayers feel heavy. Mercy does not retreat because doubt has entered the room. It sits with doubt. It waits patiently while we gather our courage again. This mercy is not threatened by questions. It understands that faith, like life, grows in cycles, sometimes blooming, sometimes resting underground. Ongoing mercy also restores what guilt tries to destroy. Guilt tells us we are unworthy of goodness, unfit for joy, disqualified from hope. Mercy interrupts that lie. It reminds us that forgiveness is not a theory, it is a practice, a daily practice, a love that keeps choosing restoration over rejection. Mercy does not merely excuse, it heals. It does not simply pardon, it renews. When we speak of ongoing mercy, we speak of a God who does not give up easily, a God who sees the long arc of our lives, not just the moment we are stuck in. Mercy has vision. It knows where we are headed even when we have lost our way. It believes in the possibility of transformation because it participates in that transformation every day. Ongoing mercy shapes how we face ourselves. It invites us to be honest without being harsh, to acknowledge our faults without drowning in them. Mercy creates space for confession without fear, growth without condemnation. It tells us that becoming better is a process, not a performance. That falling short is not failure, refusing to rise is. This mercy also calls us forward. It does not leave us where it finds us. Ongoing mercy is active, working in us, nudging us toward wisdom, patience, and compassion. It teaches us to pause before reacting, to listen before judging, to forgive before bitterness takes root. Mercy trains the heart the way water shapes stones, slowly, persistently, faithfully. In a world quick to cancel and slow to forgive, ongoing mercy stands as a quiet rebellion. It declares that people are more than their worst headlines, more than their most public mistakes. It insists on dignity. It believes in redemption. And when we receive this mercy fully, we become its messengers, carrying gentleness into harsh spaces, offering grace where none is expected. God's mercy is ongoing, because love is ongoing. It does not run out. It does not grow weary. It does not say, "This is the last time," and mean it. Mercy keeps returning like the tide, reshaping the shoreline of our lives. It stays long enough to change us. And so we give thanks, not once, but continually. We thank God for mercy that has followed us through every season, mercy that waited when we wandered, mercy that lifted us when we fell, mercy that believed in us when we doubted ourselves. This is not a mercy of moments. It is a mercy of a lifetime, and it is still at work, There is a kind of love that flickers, that arrives bright and promising, but dims when tested by disappointment, distance, or demand. And then there is unfailing love, the kind that does not retreat when the weather changes, the kind that does not loosen its grip when the road grows rough. God's unfailing love is not an ornament to our lives. It is the foundation beneath them. It is the ground that holds when everything else begins to shake. This love does not depend on our consistency, our clarity, or our courage. It is steady even when we are not. Before we learned how to ask for it, it was already present. Before we understood how deeply we needed it, it had already claimed us. God's unfailing love does not wait for permission. It moves first. It chooses first. It loves first. Foundation is not what we admire from a distance. It is what we trust with our weight. An unfailing love is strong enough to bear the full weight of our lives. The questions, the regrets, the hope that trembles, the faith that sometimes falters. We place our feet on this love every day, often without realizing it. When we rise after being knocked down, when we keep going despite exhaustion, when we believe there is still goodness ahead, we are standing on love that has not failed us. Unfailing love is quiet in its strength. It does not need applause or acknowledgement. It works beneath the surface, holding things together when they appear to be coming apart. This love does not announce itself with thunder, though it could. More often it arrives like a whisper that says, "Stay, try again. You are held." It is the voice that steadies us when fear grows loud. There are moments when we test this love without meaning to. We wander, we doubt, we turn away, we make choices that fracture our own peace. And still unfailing love remains. It does not shame us for leaving, it welcomes us when we return. It does not keep score, it keeps watch. This love understands that growth is not linear and that becoming whole takes time. God's unfailing love is not sentimental, it is not fragile, it is resilient and enduring, able to sit with grief without rushing it, able to face anger without flinching, able to absorb our disappointment without withdrawing. This love does not require us to be pleasant in order to be presentable. It meets us as we are and walks with us toward who we are meant to be. As a foundation, unfailing love gives us permission to be honest. We do not have to pretend strength when we are tired or certainty when we are unsure. We can bring our whole selves, faith and fear together, and trust that we will not be rejected for our complexity. Love that does not fail creates safety, and safety creates space for truth. This love also reshapes how we see ourselves. When we know we are loved without condition, we begin to loosen the grip of self-contempt and relentless self-judgment. We learn that our worth is not tied to productivity, perfection, or approval. We are valuable because we are loved. That truth becomes a mirror we can finally look into without turning away. Unfailing love steadies us in seasons of loss. When what we relied on disappears, when plans unravel, when people leave or circumstances change, love remains. It becomes the constant when everything else is temporary. It reminds us that while many things can be taken, love rooted in God cannot be stripped away. It stays with us in the empty spaces, filling them not with answers, but with presence. This love is also courageous. It believes in us longer than we believe in ourselves. It calls us forward when fear urges us to retreat. It sees potential where we see only limitation. God's unfailing love does not flatter us, but it does trust us with growth, with responsibility, with the work of becoming more loving ourselves. As a foundation, unfailing love teaches us how to build. It influences the way we love others. When we are rooted in love that does not abandon us, we become less desperate, less defensive, less afraid. We can afford to be generous because we are not empty. We can forgive because we know we are forgiven. We can extend patience because patience has been extended to us. This love does not promise an easy life. It promises a held life. One where pain may come, but it does not come alone. One where joy is real, not because sorrow is absent, but because love is present. Unfailing love does not insulate us from the world, it anchors us within it. There are days when we forget this foundation is there. Days when anxiety rattles us, when doubt clouds our vision, when we feel unsteady. Even then, love does not move. Foundations do not shout when the building sways, they hold. And often it is only after the storm passes that we realize what kept us standing. God's unfailing love is patient with our process. It does not rush healing or demand instant transformation. It understands that wounds close in layers, that trust rebuilds slowly, that faith sometimes needs to rest. This love does not confuse delay with denial. It knows that timing, like love, has its own wisdom. Unfailing love also restores dignity. It reminds us that we are not disposable, not replaceable, not forgotten. In a world that measures worth by usefulness and visibility, God's love declares inherent value. You matter even when no one is watching. You are seen even when you feel invisible. As a foundation, this love carries history. It has held generations before us and will hold generations after us. It has been sung in whispered prayers and shouted in songs of praise. It has survived human failure and human doubt. It has endured betrayal, silence, and fear, and still it loves. And so we stand on ordinary days and extraordinary ones on the unfailing love of God. We stand when we are confident and when we are unsure. We stand when gratitude flows easily and when it must be chosen. This love is not fragile beneath our feet. It is strong enough to hold our past, our present, and our becoming. Unfailing love is our foundation because it does not crack under pressure. It does not erode with time. It does not withdraw when tested. It holds us up so we can rise, reach, and remember who we are. Loved, held, never abandoned. February 3rd, a Tuesday. An ordinary name for an ordinary day, resting quietly in the middle of the week, carrying no promise of ceremony or spectacle. No parade announces its arrival. No history book pauses to underline it in bold. And yet this particular moment, this single square on the calendar, opens its hands and reveals a universal truth that every day, no matter how unremarkable it appears, is heavy with meaning. There is something holy about naming a day. When we say the date out loud, when we acknowledge the hour and the moment, we are claiming our place in time. We are saying, I am here now. And that awareness itself is a gift. Life does not only happen in milestones and mountaintop moments. It happens on Tuesdays. It happens between errands and obligations, between fatigue and faith. It happens when no one is watching, when applause is absent, when the world expects nothing extraordinary from us. A specific moment teaches us that God does not limit His presence to special occasions. Mercy does not wait for holidays. Love does not require perfect timing. Grace steps into the ordinary and declares it worthy. February 3rd becomes sacred not because of what we bring to it, but because God is already there. The calendar may call it common, but heaven recognizes it as chosen. Universal truth often hides inside specific details. It whispers from within the ordinary, asking us to pay attention. This Tuesday carries the same mercy as any other day, the same unfailing love that has met humanity across centuries and continents. Though the date is precise, the message is expansive. God's goodness is not confined by time. It reaches backward into memory and forward into hope, touching every life willing to notice. On this day, some wake with gratitude already on their tongues. Others wake with heaviness pressing against their chests. Some step into joy, others into grief, others into uncertainty that has no name yet. And still the truth remains the same for all of them. God is present. Love is available. Mercy is active. This is the universal promise that does not change with circumstance. A specific moment reminds us that our lives are made of small pieces stitched together by grace. We often wait for the grand revelation, the dramatic shift, the unmistakable sign. But truth reveals itself quietly, faithfully, day after day. It shows up in the strength to keep going, in the courage to pray again, in the soft realization that we have been sustained longer than we thought possible. This Tuesday does not ask us to be extraordinary. It asks us to be awake, to recognize that the same God who parted seas and raised hopes also moves gently through our routines. that the same love sung about in sacred texts hums beneath the sound of traffic, work, and waiting. Universal truth does not shout, it endures. There is a humility in honoring a specific moment. It teaches us that our lives matter not because they are famous or flawless, but because they are lived. God meets us in real time, not in ideal conditions. He meets us where we are, not where we pretend to be. February 3rd stands as a witness to this truth, that now is enough for God to work. Across cultures and generations, people have looked up at the same sky on ordinary days and whispered prayers that sound remarkably alike. Prayers for mercy, prayers for strength, prayers for love that will not give up. The date changes, the language changes, the longing does not. This is the universal truth that binds us together. We all need grace, and grace continues to show up. A single day becomes a mirror. It reflects back to us how we live most of our lives, not in highlight reels, but in repetition. Wake, work, hope, worry, try again. And within that rhythm, God remains faithful. The truth does not wear out because it is repeated. It deepens. When we pause on a day like this to pray, to give thanks, to remember mercy, we are resisting the lie that only big moments count. We are declaring that every breath carries value, that every sunrise is an invitation. Universal truth insists that nothing lived in God's presence is wasted, not even the quiet days. This moment also teaches us about connection. While this Tuesday belongs to us here and now, it is also shared. Somewhere else, another heart is praying. Another voice is giving thanks. Another soul is being reminded that love has not failed them. Time zones differ. Circumstances vary. Truth remains the same. A specific moment grounds us. A universal truth lifts us. Together they hold us steady. The day reminds us that we are finite, living inside minutes and hours. The truth reminds us that God is infinite, moving beyond what we can measure. And somehow, in love, He meets us at the intersection of the two. February 3rd will pass, as all days do. The calendar will turn. New worries will arise. New mercies will greet us. But the truth revealed here will not expire. It will follow us into tomorrow and the days after that, whispering the same steady assurance. You are seen, you are held, you are not alone. This is the power of a single moment. It anchors us in reality while pointing us toward eternity. It reminds us that God does not need perfect days to reveal perfect love. He only needs willing hearts. So we honor this day, not because it is rare, but because it is real, and in doing so we touch a truth that stretches beyond the date, beyond the week, beyond the limits of our understanding, that God's mercy and unfailing love are present now, always have been, and always will be. Prayer is not an escape from life, it is an encounter with it. When we pray, we do not step outside the world, we step more fully into it, carrying our whole selves, unedited and unafraid, into the presence of God. Prayer becomes a mirror first. It reflects back to us who we are, where we stand, and what we carry. And then gently it becomes a river, washing us clean enough to begin again. In prayer, reflection happens before renewal. We pause long enough to listen to our own hearts. We hear the questions we have been avoiding and the gratitude we have been postponing. We notice the ache we have learned to live with and the joy we forgot to name. Prayer does not rush us past these truths. It invites us to sit with them, to tell the truth out loud, trusting that honesty is not a threat to God, but a bridge to Him. Reflection in prayer is not about self-accusation. It is about awareness. We look back not to be trapped by yesterday, but to understand how we arrived here today. Prayer allows us to lay our memories on the table, successes and missteps alike, and see them held by a love that does not recoil. In that safe space, reflection becomes an act of courage. We admit what we have lost, what we have learned, and what we still long for. Prayer teaches us to slow down in a world that rewards hurry. It creates a stillness where our souls can finally catch up with our bodies. In that stillness, we begin to recognize patterns, how fear speaks to us, how hope tries to rise, how mercy has been quietly at work, even when we were distracted. Reflection is the gift of seeing clearly, without the fog of urgency. And then comes renewal, not as a dramatic overhaul, but as a steady recentering. Renewal in prayer is often subtle. It arrives as a softened heart, a clarified intention, a renewed willingness to try again. It does not always change our circumstances immediately, but it changes how we stand within them. We rise from prayer not always with answers, but with strength. Prayer renews us by reminding us of what is true. It pulls us back from the edge of despair and grounds us in love that has not failed. It restores perspective when life has narrowed our vision. In prayer we remember that we are not alone in our striving, not isolated in our pain, not forgotten in our waiting. Renewal begins with remembering. There is a holy exchange in prayer. We bring our burdens and we receive peace. We bring our confusion and we receive clarity enough for the next step. We bring our weariness and we receive rest that reaches deeper than sleep. This exchange does not require eloquence. It requires openness. God listens for the heart, not the performance. Prayer renews our courage. It reminds us that even trembling steps count as movement, that faith does not have to be loud to be real. When we pray, we borrow strength from a source that does not run dry. We remember that what feels impossible alone becomes possible when carried with God. Reflection in prayer also shapes our gratitude. As we look back, we begin to notice how often we were sustained without realizing it. How many times mercy arrived disguised as endurance. How love stayed present even when circumstances were unkind. Prayer sharpens our memory, teaching us to name blessings we once overlooked. Renewal follows gratitude naturally. When we recognize how much we have been given, something within us loosens. Resentment softens. Fear relaxes its grip. We become lighter, not because life has become easier, but because we are no longer carrying it alone. Gratitude clears space for joy to breathe again. Prayer also renews our sense of purpose. It reminds us that our lives are not random, that our days carry meaning beyond productivity. In prayer, we realign with what matters. We remember that kindness counts, that integrity matters, that love is never wasted. Renewal is the reawakening of intention. There are times when prayer feels dry, when words falter and silence stretches long. Even then, reflection and renewal are at work. Silence in prayer is not absence, it is listening. It is trust. It is the soul resting long enough to be reshaped. Renewal does not always announce itself. Sometimes it grows quietly, like roots strengthening underground. Prayer renews our compassion. As we reflect on our own need for mercy, we become more gentle with others. We begin to understand that everyone is carrying something unseen. Prayer widens our hearts, making room for empathy where judgment once lived. In this way, renewal moves beyond us and into the world through our actions. Reflection in prayer teaches us patience with God, with others, with ourselves. It reminds us that growth is not instant and healing is not linear. Prayer gives us permission to be unfinished. Renewal assures us that unfinished does not mean unworthy. Each time we pray, we practice beginning again. We let go of what has hardened us and receive what can soften us. We step out of prayer changed, not always dramatically, but meaningfully. A little more grounded, a little more hopeful, a little more aware of love at work. Prayer as reflection and renewal is not reserved for sacred spaces or perfect moments. It belongs to ordinary days and tired hearts. It meets us in kitchens and classrooms and hospital rooms and quiet corners of our homes. Wherever we are willing to pause, prayer is willing to meet us. And so we return to prayer again and again, not because we have mastered it, but because we need it. We return to reflect, to remember, to release. We return to be renewed, to be strengthened, to be reminded of who we are and whose we are. In prayer, we discover that reflection leads us inward, but renewal sends us back into our lives with steadier hearts and clearer eyes. Prayer does not remove us from the world. It prepares us to live in it with grace.